Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to be discussing my thoughts as to why I believe we won't be seeing Rick kill Negan anytime soon, as well as why the Saviour leader will live on after Season 8's All Out War arc has reached its conclusion. This video will contain spoilers from the Walking Dead comic book series as well as potential spoilers for the future of the show, so if that's something you wish to avoid then please don't watch this video. Anyway, without further ado, let's begin.
I told you already, I'm gonna kill you.
Now when Rick says he's going to kill someone, you can normally bet your house on it happening. Rick has made this promise to many people in the past and Mr. Grimes rarely fails to deliver. However, despite him telling Negan he's going to kill him on many occasions, I just don't think Negan will end up sharing the same fate as Shane and the Governor, and there's a few reasons why I believe this to be the case. First and foremost is the fact that Rick spares Negan's life in the comics, with him still currently alive and kicking even though the comic books have skipped ahead 2 years after the war story arc finished. As the war comes to an end, Negan and Rick find themselves outside the Hilltop's gates face to face with one another. Rick explains to Negan that the fighting that is taking place is pointless and that the two of them would be better served by pooling their resources and working together. Whilst Negan is busy contemplating Rick's argument, Rick uses this moment to deliver a cheap shot and slashes his throat. Negan somehow manages to find the strength to attack Rick despite his injury and breaks Rick's leg in the process. With both parties on the floor, Rick crippled and Negan bleeding out, Rick orders the Hilltop doctor to save Negan's life at the expense of fixing his leg, causing him to never fully recover. With how closely the show has been following the comics of late, I highly doubt the showrunners will deviate from this sequence of events. I feel like the Old Man Rick clip, which can be found in the opening episode of Season 8, is laying the foundations for this moment to take place. The scene in question is set in the future with Rick lying in a bed with a crutch propped up beside him. Now my take on this is that Negan breaking Rick's leg will happen in the show, just as will the act of Rick saving his life. Rick ultimately decides to save Negan in the comics in an effort to prove he's better than him. His aim is to rebuild society, to change the attitude he and his people have towards killing. No longer will they recklessly kill without thought or care, instead they will value life and punish those who break their laws by placing them in jail. What better way to show you're serious about forming a peaceful society than by keeping the man alive who has arguably committed the most evil deeds against said society. Let's not forget that Morgan built a prison cell in Alexandria towards the latter stages of Season 6. I mean, I don't think that the showrunners would have included this taking place if it weren't to be of some significance later down the line. Although it does differ in location to where Negan's cell is in the comics, with it being in the basement-like area in Rick's house on the paper version, I still think that this is where Negan could wind up being in Season 9. One of the theories I had prior to the start of this season was the idea that Morgan is going to die towards the end of the war, which will cause Rick to want to honour his all life is precious legacy by letting Negan live. However, with Morgan going completely crazy and killing people nearly every time he's on screen at present, I'm not really sure that if he dies he will be remembered for his peaceful ways. So I'm less confident about this idea than I was a couple of months ago, but it does still remain a possibility. Again, going back for a moment to the first episode of this season, I really don't think it's a mere coincidence that the season premiere is named Mercy. I believe the episode is hinting that Rick will ultimately show Negan mercy by allowing him to live. This could also explain why Rick is saying "May my mercy prevail over my wrath" in another strange scene seemingly set in the future. The currently unnamed character who appeared during the beginning of the episode said the same line to Carl, so obviously at some point him and Rick get together. And perhaps it is actually him who ultimately causes Rick to have a change of heart. In addition to the hints that are included in the season premiere, there have also been many other instances suggesting that Rick is questioning his attitude towards killing. The second episode, The Damned, sees Rick coming face to face with a baby whose father he had just murdered, causing him to reflect on the type of man he has become. Episode 3, Munster, brought back Morales, whose main purpose seemed to be to explain to Rick why he was no better than Negan. Daryl quickly put the long-term missing Morales out of his misery, which clearly angered Rick as he wanted to try and talk him down, something you probably wouldn't normally associate him with doing. I think it's fair to say that Rick has become quite cold and emotionless when it comes to killing those who oppose him, especially during the last few seasons, and it seems that this way of thinking has rubbed off on some of those who are around him. Seeing Daryl ruthlessly fire an arrow through the head of a guy who was on the same side as him and Rick during the early days of the show patently annoyed Rick. Perhaps Rick will spare Negan because he feels that those around him need someone to look up to, someone to lead by example. Rick has been killing people for years without a second thought, so it's no wonder his followers do exactly the same thing. By not killing Negan he sends a message that killing isn't acceptable. If Rick can spare his greatest enemy, then his people can also rethink their stance on killing. Furthermore, the latest episode, The Big Scary You, contains a moment in which Rick and Daryl come to blows with one another due to a clash of ideas relating to some explosives they find on a Saviour truck. Daryl wanted to use the explosives to blow a hole through the sanctuary, causing the walkers surrounding the Saviour's HQ to flood inside, overwhelming the people within the factory, causing a swift end to the war. Rick is vehemently against this, suggesting that innocents would die and that isn't something he is prepared to do. Once again, I believe this is another example of the show illustrating that Rick does have a conscience. Even though he wants to win the war, he isn't prepared to kill civilians in order to do so. I also feel that the war is taking a big toll on Rick emotionally, and will only continue to further do so as the season progresses. There's already been a few examples of Saviours telling Rick that all the death and horror on display is his fault, and I feel that this may get into his head somewhat. Rick was the one who gathered the communities together and sent them out to war, therefore it could be argued that he is the one responsible for those who are dying on the battlefields. Before Rick decided to take down the Saviours, the Kingdom and the Hilltop were living in peace with them. Sure, they didn't have a great life as they were essentially under Negan's thumb, but you can now understand after witnessing all the deaths that have occurred, why someone like Ezekiel was so keen to keep the peace with the Saviours, even if it did mean getting pushed around by them. Rick has already seen a lot of nasty things as a result of going to war, which clearly will affect him mentally. I feel that he will never want to see anything of the sort happen again in the future, which is why he will be so intent on forming a peaceful society that is opposed to killing. Again, what better way to make this point than by keeping your greatest enemy alive? So far I've given a lot of story related reasons as to why Rick won't kill Negan, however the next one has nothing to do with Rick or his motivations and instead relates to the Walking Dead fanbase. I believe that Rick, or no one else for that matter, will kill Negan because he is simply too popular. I know he has his haters, but I'm confident in saying that Negan is a fan favourite, and getting rid of such a well-known revered villain wouldn't make much sense for the future of the show. I went to Walker's Stalker in London last year and as expected there was a lot of cosplay going on, but the most popular character by far was Negan. You couldn't go more than a couple of steps without seeing another person with a leather jacket on, holding a replica Lucille over their shoulder. Now bear in mind that this event took place when Season 7 was still airing, a time when Glenn and Abe's deaths were relatively fresh in the memory, yet Negan still proved to be hugely favoured by most of the convention visitors. Every other villain Rick has come up against has died, which on one hand has been a good thing because they've all got what they deserved, but on the other hand it has meant losing some great characters. Even if you dislike Shane and the Governor because of their actions, you've got to admit they did make for some great viewing. After the Governor died, the show struggled to find its real next villain, and in my mind the story suffered as a result. When Negan came along, finally a worthy adversary for Rick had appeared, and for many his arrival provided the show with a much needed kiss of life. Negan is to Rick as to what the Joker is to Batman. Batman has plenty other nemesis in his rogue gallery, however Joker is the one who always sticks around tormenting him. And it's the same with Negan. Even though he may turn out to eventually help Rick as he has done in the comics, he will forever be there reminding Rick of what happened to Glenn and Abe, torturing Rick on the inside without even having to say a word. He's the iconic villain of the franchise, which is why I don't think we'll be seeing him go anywhere soon, whether you like him or not. So there you have it, my reasons why I believe Rick won't kill Negan and why Negan will live on after this season has ended. As always, please let me know your thoughts below, and until next time, thank you very much for watching and goodbye.